Wait, no, something's missing here. Something's missing. Wait. There we go. Perfect. Now I'm more than qualified to review this film.
Literature is like an ambulance speeding through the night to save someone.
Well, hello. Your breakfast, Miss Robinson. Shall I leave it on the table?
And today we have, always awkward with extra eyewear, but we have Jane Austen, Wrecked My Life. With all these highfalutin films these days, all this horror, all this action, every now and then it is nice to slow down the pace and get to something a bit more grounded and yet still complicated, because we're dealing with, matters of the heart here. The biggest mistake you might make, that I almost made, would be just to let this one kind of fly under your radar. I got a chance to check this movie out recently. I knew it was coming out, right? But I wasn't really aware of it. I hadn't even seen a trailer. I had seen a poster, and literally it was the basic poster, so I didn't even know who was in it. I didn't know what it was really fully about or any of the subject material. I assumed it'd be a romantic comedy, and I was kind of half right, but it is a little bit deeper. I thought it was actually pretty good. It was maybe even really good, maybe even up there on the precipice, right? The film is directed by Laura Piani, more known as a writer, really, in terms of cinematic circles. This is actually her first feature film, if you don't count the short film that she did technically before this, which was Prudence les deux à l'avant en poupe. I don't want to say on poop at the end there. Granted, it's pretty simple direction overall. Like I said, it's a grounded film. It's just well-composed shots, good lighting. The emotion is conveyed well enough. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but what I'm trying to say is for her first outing here, she did a bang-up job. This film is actually mostly in French, but also a little bit of English here and there. So just keep that in mind. I didn't even know it was going to be a kind of a foreign film going into it, but it was a pleasant little surprise. There's a unique cast of characters for sure. Arguably our two main leads here. Both these actors I'm about to tell you about, they seem vaguely familiar, and there's a reason for that. Camille Rutherford, leading gal, Camilla, but she most recently played, and funny enough, I covered this film on my channel. Excellent film, by the way, if you're a fan of courtroom dramas. She played Zoe in Anatomy of a Fall, which was, like I said, great movie, check it out. And our other gentleman here, Charlie Anson, which I basically referred to in my review as a, checks notes here, discount young Hugh Grant. But what's hilarious about this, we're in the literary world and people that are romanticizing literature and the process and the act of writing and such. In terms of what his IMDb says is his most well-known for, filmography-wise, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Like, come on. I guess he looks the part, for sure, looks the part. Jane Austen, Wrecked My Life. What is it about? I hesitate to call it a romantic comedy. There is romance involved, and there are comedic elements, but it's almost like she's not that old. My mind goes to midlife crisis, coming of age, a woman at a time mentally and emotionally, if that makes sense. Like, she's in this world, works at a bookstore, recommends literature to people both French and in the know and American wannabe like writers and artists and all this. And she's living her life. She's been single for a while. She has some past trauma that also affects aspects of her life. She's got this very close male best friend who kind of like, is there something there? And her friend is like, well, I know you're stuck in a rut, and I'm worried you're not going to do anything about it. So submits her writing into this like Jane Austen writers, I think it's more of like a workshop, right? And she gets accepted. Like, they think the first few chapters of what she wrote that she didn't even know anybody would see gets seen. They like it. Gets the invitation. Her friends all have to like push her out of the house, go here to this writing workshop and try to, live a little, live life, get some writing in, and maybe even meet a handsome fellow while you're over there. And that's pretty much the movie. From there, the hijinks and the romantic entanglements, and then there's her best friend, but there's this new fella. Will they, won't they? Who's to say? I think we kind of know how it's gonna go, but at the same time, maybe you don't, and that's pretty much the movie right there. They don't dwell on it too much, but it happens a few times, and I kind of appreciated it as a fella, right? There's the male gaze, and I'm very well acquainted with it. For lack of a better term, it permeates the cinematic landscape. So it's nice when a film like this comes along, and this is the female gaze. It's or even like little moments of fantasy, perhaps here and there. Similar to I finally watched Pride and Prejudice for the first time this last year, and there was a lot of that too. More of the that yearning and that sort of the emotion behind not just like the sex and the hot steamy romance, but it was just the wistfulness and the artistic leanings. And even though I myself am not a woman, shocker, I know, in terms of the situation she's in, right, where it's trying to contend with all the tropes and pitfalls of modern dating, she even literally goes out of her way to say as much, where it's just like, you can't do the apps and the likes and the whole one-night stands. When I say that the movie felt cute, funny, and relatable to the general sentiment, because, before I, met a gal myself, very similar situation. It's just, it feels like it's a numbers game, because oftentimes it is in our current society. And so feeling like we've lost our sense of like romance and the classic method of finding that special person, and then I guess you could call it a courtship, perhaps. A little bit of a kindred spirit. I think she's a little less adventurous than someone like me. It was cute and funny. Like, was it hilarious? I don't know if I'd go as far as to say I was laughing out loud at every single joke. There were definitely some moments I could tell there were like a funny thing would happen, and I was watching it at home alone, this little the screener that I got, but I could tell there were moments where there were pauses, almost like in a Marvel movie, where the audience is supposed to laugh at something, and I chuckled and laughed quite a few times throughout the film, but I could also tell that there were beats purposely written in there to also allow for the audience to do so. And she does go on a fun little like adventure, or rather I put in my notes, a fun little misadventure via this writer's retreat. It makes for some funny little situations that are not too intense or too ridiculous, but definitely some social faux pas are committed, and just funny little stuff that's not gonna have you busting your gut in your seat, but it was cute. It was cute. I couldn't tell if it was just her listening in or if she was being insightful, and I think I figured out that there were moments in the movie where our main character is using her imagination. Like, she'd walk by somebody writing something, and then she would imagine in that person's voice what they're writing about or talking about based on how they look, almost like she had a sixth sense for the kind of thing. It would have been a cool concept to see played more times, which is unfortunate that it wasn't, but seeing her imagination kind of peak in those moments in a poetic sense, like a literary sense. However, the movie's not without its flaws. It's a little tropey here and there. Oh, the male best friend, will they, won't they? Something starts developing, but now there's another fella in the picture, so there's the whole, potential love triangle and some of the social tension therein. But it was also nice to see that, like, throughout all of it, her best friend did remain likable and helpful and encouraging. Like, nothing to like really prompt the anxiety, just more of like you're sitting there at home and you're like, oh, like how's this gonna shake out? Wish some scenes were a bit longer, in that there's like actually some lines of dialogue in this film that I liked a lot, because you'd think that it's gonna be a romantic comedy kind of re-coming of age, if you will, finding a special someone, but also really getting into the writing that they want to do and trying to find their rhythm and their groove with that. But also it's called Jane Austen Wrecked My Life, so then I went in worrying that I wouldn't be, I read, right, but I was worried that I wasn't going to be like literarily, not even a word, competent enough to keep up with potential references in this film. But I was almost disappointed to see that I followed it pretty clearly, because aside from some like deep cut book and character from Jane Austen books comparisons, and there were some mild literary references, but not as many as I thought there would be. Every now and then there'd be like an interesting conversation regarding the power of the written word, and they would be arguing whether or not an author's purpose is supposed to be politically motivated or like emotionally motivated from the heart, and they kind of start to delve into conversational talking points like that, but it never gets past that surface level. It's always like mile wide and like an inch deep. There's several moments where somebody drops a really good line.
Literature is like an ambulance speeding through the night to save someone.
Good lines that tie in like life lessons from writing and from art, and they're just kind of like, all right, cool, I'm deuces, I'm out of here, and just continue. Like one of the first scenes where she goes to like meet the grandfather in the garden, and they have a nice little exchange, and I'm like, okay, cool, so he's about to drop some like mad wisdom on her, right? And then doesn't, it just cuts. I'm like, what? I figured this scene would be longer. Although that being said, there were also some scenes that I liked where there was nice pleasant music in the film, sometimes diegetically in the scene and sometimes just added in post just via the score, like the orchestration for the movie. And there'd be some nice scenes where it'd be like a long one take, and there'd be no dialogue. It would just be our main character fantasizing about a guy in a restaurant or somebody in her head, her playing the piano in this writer's retreat. There were some nice scenes where dialogue gets cut away, just the character, and you're just kind of sitting there in the scene with them. Gentle artistic scenes like that I just enjoyed in the experience. I'm getting carried away now. I was gonna say, I don't want to sound like rude, but it is not that deep. That's my main issue with the film. It's good. I would even go as far as to say it's really good. It was a good watch, better than what I was expecting. I would love to see more of what Laura wants to make. That being said, I didn't absolutely love the movie. I thought that the cast of characters at the writing retreat, I know they're not the main characters, right? They're like not the focus of it, but I almost wanted to see a bit more involvement from them, especially the grandparents, right? Like I loved their characters, and they had some good scenes, but at some point toward the end of the film, it just gets to a point where we just flat out leave the retreat altogether and see no one except the love interest again. And I get it, because maybe they're not necessary for the core romance in the story, but it just seemed like a whole lot to just kind of drop at the door and move on past. I've only got a few minor complaints. I would still recommend it. It was a fun, funny, cute, kind of intelligent movie. Like rom-com almost is a disservice to what it actually is, which is more of an emotional character study, just kind of following somebody who might, for you at home, be painfully relatable side as she finds love, finds purpose, kind of recontextualizes her life and finds a better way forward getting out of the rut that she unintentionally dug herself into. All that being said, I would still give Jane Austen Wrecked My Life like a 4 out of 5. I give it a 4 out of 5. It's up there. It's not near perfection, but it's definitely a good film. I'd even say it's really good, and for the most part, kind of one of those films where maybe it's a one and done for me. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing it again, but that's all I gotta say about that one. Thank you guys and gals so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode of whatever movie review I do. And goodbye, travelers.